Hi guys, welcome to November's Dispatches. November's going to be quite a busy month for KNC because apart from all of the new items that are coming out, later in the month I'll be heading off once more to Europe. I've not been there for 4 years, and this is really a chance to connect with our dealers and collectors in Italy, in France, in London, and in Germany. Now I've been to Germany I think around 6 or 7 years ago, so it's a very long time since I've been back there, so I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be a very hectic trip. We've got little events in every place, so I'm looking forward to meeting some of you guys there that will be watching from Europe. But anyway, before we get to the trip, let's get to the releases. Now, many of you will already have seen the special tiger video that we did relating to these Kursk tigers that you see in front of you. And again, from the notes that we'll be releasing with the dispatches themselves, it tells more of the story. But just to sort of shorten that down, the Battle of Kursk in July 1943 can actually claim to be one of the pivotal battles of the Eastern Front. Now, of course, everyone's heard of the earlier Battle of Stalingrad, which was really the first time that the Germans were defeated in Russia after Operation Barbarossa. But by July 1943, they were still somewhat confident that they could take on and still beat the Red Army. And what had happened was, in the entire German front line that ran across the breadth of the Soviet Union, there was a huge salient in the southwest of the country, a Russian salient in the German line. A salient just means a big bulge into the opposing army's defense works. And the Russians the Germans decided that this had to be eliminated, and by eliminating the salient, it would also shorten their defense line, so that would mean they could use those extra forces to form you can't say an extra line of defense against any Russian attacks. Anyway, to achieve that, they were really relying on many of the new tanks that were just coming on stream. Particularly I'm talking about the Panthers and the Tigers. These had started to be delivered at the first quarter of 1943, and by the time of the Battle of Kursk, which took place in July, it was hoped there would be many hundreds of these tanks available for the assault. It began on the 5th of July. The Germans had collected somewhere in the region of 250, 260 of the new Panthers, and they had just over 210 Tigers available. So in actual fact, the majority of the armoured vehicles that took part in the Battle of Kursk on the German side were much earlier Panzer IIIs, Panzer IVs, and all kinds of other German armour that was available, including quite a number of captured Russian T-34s, which had been put back into service on the German side. Well, the attack took place, as I said, began on the 5th of July 1943, but the Germans did not anticipate that the Russians themselves would have learned of the German plans and built up huge defence works throughout the Kursk region. So that although in the very early stages of the battle the Germans achieved some incredible successes, it soon ground to a halt. As the further they got in, the tougher and tougher became the Russian defences. To such an extent that really after about a week the attack petered out. And not only that, what also happened elsewhere was that the Western Allies, Britain and America, had at the same time invaded Sicily. So Hitler had to move some of his forces from the Kursk offensive all the way into Western Europe and down the leg of Italy to the boot, right down at the bottom which is Sicily, and send some of his best troops there. That weakened the strength of the German attack even more. However, getting back to what we've got here is our two Kursk Tigers. They both belong to the 2nd Waffen-SS Division, known as Das Reich. And as you can see, they've got a 2-colour camouflage, which was very typical of most of the Tigers that had arrived from the German factories at the Russian front at that time of the war. At the same time, they belong to the same unit, so that's why they've got hull numbers, which on the side you can see are S32 and S33. In actual fact, even I was surprised about this. Das Reich only had 12 Tiger tanks at the time of the Battle of Kursk. For some reason I thought there was going to be a lot more, but having said that, those 12 Tiger tanks achieved amazing kill ratios of at least 5 or 6 to 1 for every one of their own losses. Just an amazing battlefield performance. So you know that these are all metal, or virtually 95% metal, a little bit of resin. However, the turret, the main gun, the hull, quite a few of the accessories are all, and including of course the metal tracks, are all die-cast metal. This is actually zinc. It's one of the toughest metals you can find. Many of the toy cars that we all used to play with as kids were made out of the same material. Super strong, really good. But as you can see, we've got the moving tracks, moving wheels, full suspension as well, and of course the gun can elevate and depress as you prefer. Each of the two models has 2 original tank crews in each model. So you've got a choice of tanks, you've got the tank crews that go with them. They all come in a terrific full colour presentation box, and they will be available. In fact, our team were up inspecting the tanks at the factory just 2 days ago. Happy to report everything was great. Now they're getting all boxed up and they'll be dispatched down to Hong Kong very shortly, and we hope that they will start being released around the 10th to the 13th of this month. So look out for them. I know many of you have ordered them already. I'm happy to say they're going incredibly well, so I think they'll sell out in a fairly short time. Grab them while you can. Now, moving away from Kursk for a moment, let's go across the ocean, or several oceans perhaps, and go all the way to the Rio Grande, which is the river, the mighty river that actually divides the United States from Mexico, and go back to the time of the cattle drives. And our latest additions to the cattle drives are these 5 figures you see here and 3 additional horses. Let's talk about the figures themselves. Right at the front here is the figure that we're calling Buck, and he represents a deputy sheriff of a small border town on the Texas side of the Rio Grande, and the type of guy that had to deal with all kinds of lawlessness and rustling that was endemic to that area during the time after the Civil War and up through the time of the great cattle drives. As you can see, he's standing there leaning on his Winchester repeating rifle, and on his side he's got an army Colt, which was the revolver that supplied most of the Union forces during the Civil War, and it was incredibly popular after the Civil War as well. So maybe this guy's holding on to a piece of army surplus that he decided not to hand back after his time in service. Now, on the other end, right over here, is another of our typical Mexican vaqueros. Vaqueros really is a kind of Mexican cowboy, and they were working on both sides of the Rio Grande, and then they moved in between Mexico and the United States all the time. And again, typically he's got his sombrero, he's got his sarap folded over one shoulder, and in his case he's also got a carbine by his side. Next to him, or not next to him, but in the same little series, is a character we're calling Diego. Now Diego is a typical pistolero, a Mexican gunfighter of that period. Now these were obviously guns for hire, and would go to the highest bidder, or the person that could afford to pay for their salary. And he's, if you look closely at him, and you'll see when we do the close-ups later, he's carrying two pistols, and he looks like a character that's a pretty good shot with whatever he's using. Next to him is another character called Antonio. Now Antonio is a typical bandito. Again, the Mexico of that period was a fairly lawless period. There'd been all kinds of revolutions. They almost seem to have them on a weekly basis in Mexico, and the people that would take advantage of all these political upheavals were criminals, and they'd form themselves into bandit gangs, some small, some quite large, that would basically be the scourge of the countryside. Now from time to time these banditos would also cross the border into Texas and other border states and commit all kinds of crimes there. So you can see that our deputy sheriff here would be most definitely on the lookout for somebody that looked like Antonio. Again, Antonio's got a Winchester by his side. Again, Winchester's very popular as a repeating rifle. Colt 45 on his hip, and he's also got a wicked looking dagger, and I won't try to venture on what he might like to do with his dagger. But anyway, a fairly unsavoury character, and someone that you would not want to meet on a dark night or any other night. The final figure of this is a cowboy, and the cowboy here is called Clay. Now again, he's typical of the guys that would be part of the trail drives and would be part of the crew that would be hired to drive all these cattle up from Texas all the way to the railheads in Kansas and further north. Now most cowboys of course had their own horse, but even though they had their own horse, they would be given at least one other horse from the remuda. That was the herd of horses that was always kept by the trail boss, also for use by his men on the trail drive. Now the most important thing that for a cowboy to have in his possession belonging to himself were his weapons, and again this guy's got a Winchester, and that was the sort of favoured rifle at that time, and a sidearm, and the sidearm could be all kinds of different pistols and revolvers. But even more important almost is he needed to have his own saddle, and this guy's carrying a saddle in one arm and his rifle in the other. So again, another very useful addition to our cattle drive series. Now, talking of the fact that he's looking for a horse, maybe he's looking for one of these three horses that are standing over there. We launched one horse earlier, a Pinto, and that did really well, and we had lots of people saying, can you just do some more standing horses? So we've done three more variations. The first one here is called a dun, and that's a sort of kind of sandy yellowish coloured horse. We've also got the black horse obviously, and at the very end a chestnut. So you make your choice which ones you like, but they're always good to add to any cattle drive scene or any western town scene that you might be putting together. Moving on from that, completely different, we're going all the way back to Hong Kong in the 1960s and the latest little additions to our Hong Kong All Our Yesterdays range. Here we've got a young boy having his hair cut by a street barber, and again back in those days street barbers were very common, and literally they'd have a chair that they would bring, they would put a little plank on it for a kid to sit on and have his hair cut there and then. So the kid is having his hair cut. Next to that is this little figure here, which is can be a young mother or perhaps an elder sibling of a family, and on her back she's wearing a special harness almost that the baby or a toddler could be put into, so that they could still go about, the young person or the mother could go about doing something. Their hands are free, but the baby is well protected on her back. And again, when I first came to Hong Kong in the 70s, this was still quite a common sight. I've not seen anything like this in a long time, but back in the 70s and certainly in the 60s, very common. You saw them everywhere, and it's actually quite a nice figure to almost have her watching the young boy getting his haircut, or she can be standing around and watching these two young lads enjoying some breakfast or lunch or dinner. Again, what you would often see in Hong Kong in those days, where people were working, that maybe their parents are working on a street stall or some little venture that's out in the open, the kids would be nearby having their lunch or doing their homework or whatever. And here we've got two young boys sharing a bowl of maybe fried rice or whatever it might be, and they're tucking into that. And the reason that they would do that is because the parents were working, or the adult in the house was working. There was no one to look after them at home, so it's better that they came and could enjoy their meal next to while their parents were working. The parents could also keep one eye on the kids to make sure that they weren't getting up to any mischief. So that's the latest additions for Hong Kong, all our yesterdays. From there, we'll move to the front here, and this is a second generation version of one of our most popular Life of Jesus series, which was the three wise men, or the Magi as they're called in the Bible. The three wise men journeyed from somewhere in the far east all the way to the Middle East, because they followed the star, and they had heard of some miraculous happening, which of course was the birth of Jesus. Now, we did these figures when we first launched the series. Again, incredibly popular, sold out, and eventually we let them go for a little while. But then so many people said, could we get them again? Well, rather than just doing the same thing over again, we just said, well, let's give them to our master painter, and let's see what he can come up with in terms of new colour schemes to make them even more attractive than they were first time round. And this is the new much improved painting version of the original Three Wise Men. And as you can see in front of them, they've got the little carpet, and there's three special gifts that they presented to the infant baby, which was of course gold, frankincense and myrrh. Now, if you've got the Three Wise Men, you have to think, how did they get all the way from the Far East to the Middle East? Well, I'm pretty sure they did it by camel. And again, this was another one that had been much requested, and we thought, right, let's try something a little bit more colourful than what we did before. And this is the latest iteration of I'm calling them the Three Wise Camels, but obviously to make them more colourful, to reflect the status and symbols of the Three Wise Men themselves. So we'll get three terrific looking camels that you can add to your manger scene, or whatever you do with your Life of Jesus figures, especially over the Christmas period. Very appropriate, so I hope you like them. Then, last but not least, two little figures right here. Two of the supporting characters from the Sherlock Holmes books, and they come in the form of Mycroft Holmes, Sherlock Holmes' elder brother, and Miss Irene Adler, who appears in several of the Sherlock Holmes stories, and is rumoured to be, if not the paramour of Sherlock Holmes himself, but a lady that he's definitely shown a great deal of interest in. But starting with Sherlock Holmes' elder brother Mycroft, according to the books, it's said that he has all of the detective abilities of his younger brother, but he doesn't have the same force of character that he actually wants to do anything with them. In actual fact, it's said that he's a high government official in the British government. We don't know what department he works in, but anyway, it's obviously fairly well paid because he's a very well dressed gentleman. So we've got him in a pearl grey ensemble, and looks very dashing indeed. So that's Mycroft Holmes. Next to him, of course, is Irene Adler. Now, the books refer to her as someone who was an opera singer, but also an actress. So she's used to appearing on the stage, and obviously that means she has a certain confidence about herself, but very, very intelligent, and able to give Sherlock Holmes a run for his money, and that might be part of what attracts him to her, and vice versa. We have her dressed, I wouldn't say racily, but you can see the theatrical background in her manner and the way she's dressed. A little bit flamboyant, but very attractive figure. So there you have it. That's the releases for this month. In the background here, this is just a little project that I'm working on, which is actually some buildings that are made. Well, we did the original illustrations for, and then constructed them so that from one building you can actually make two different scenes, or the two scenes comprising one four-square building, and by just putting two of them together, you can create a mini street that you can use for Streets of Old Hong Kong, or even more, you can use for Hong Kong All Our Yesterdays. Now, what else to tell you? I think that's about it for the moment. As I say, I'm looking forward to coming to Europe later in the month. I'll be at the London show with our friend Stefano from Cymex. So if you're going to be attending the London show, I think it's on the Saturday 2nd of December, I'll be there, and I hope to bring along one or two little surprises to let you see also. But as I say, I'll be in Milan at the beginning of the tour, then Paris, then London, and finally Stuttgart to meet our German friends. So that's the story so far. I'll leave it at that, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.